Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to my review of Grim Dawn. Grim Dawn is very much a classic ARPG in the vein of Diablo or Torchlight. If you're a fan of them, then I will outright say, pick this up, you won't regret it. I will quickly mention that when I review this game, I'm talking about the base game as well as the DLC, since the DLC really makes the game shine. But now for gameplay. Right off the bat, Grim Dawn slams you in the face with a lot of information. When you hit level 2 and must pick a class, and there are a lot of options. 9 of them in fact. And once you hit level 10, you unlock dual classing, which means even more choices. This means that going in, you have the choice of 36 character classes. Or 45 if you choose to put all your points into a single class, but why would you ever do that? The diverse options here are amazing. Couple that with the fact that you gain attribute points to build up your character through either physique, cunning, or spirit, and there's even more choices that need to be made. The nice thing is that on the whole, those attributes will mostly be determined by the gear you want to wear, so you don't need to worry about them too much. But now we get into the devotion tree. This thing is huge. It's a giant field of constellations which supply bonuses for your character that you can get by restoring shrines found throughout the world. And a lot of these constellations require prerequisites from other points in other constellations, and it can become very large, very fast. Even zoomed out as far as you can go, you cannot put all the constellations on the screen at one time. So all in all, you have an insane amount of freedom in choosing what kind of character you want to make and what spells they'll use. Want to make a pet character? Well, you can do it in multiple ways. Want to run around with giant two-handed weapons and shoot out lightning? You got it. Want to just cast spells and fireballs? Got you covered. But this freedom also creates a problem. Decision paralysis. There are so many choices that it's very easy to reach a situation where you don't know where to start or what to do. Luckily, with a small idea such as I want to summon minions, you can easily search online and find cookie-cutter builds to suit your needs. You don't need to go from scratch if you don't want to, and if you want something that works as you learn the game, they can be an especially helpful tool. What's even better is that you aren't locked into anything. There's an NPC at the very beginning of the game which lets you reallocate your skill points as well as your devotion points for a small fee. Later in the game you even get access to potions which let you reset your devotion and attribute points. This way, if you find your build isn't working or you want to try something new, then you aren't stuck playing something you hate. You can always change, adapt, and try different builds. Unfortunately, you cannot change your classes, so you should be clear on those going in. Now, I'm personally not a late game man. I don't care about loot farming or time attack or horde modes, but if that's your jam, it's here in spades. There's an entire DLC called the Crucible that lets you face off against waves of enemies. And there's a region known as the Shattered Realm where you can race through the levels and unlock amazing rewards. There's something here for everyone. Plot-wise, the game is fine. It's serviceable. It's not terribly exciting, but it doesn't need to be. The one downside is that aside from main quests, the majority of the story is provided through notes found in the world. These vastly vary in quality. Some of the notes you find are the last moments of people trapped in their homes by monsters. Some detail excavations that have taken place as they explore newly discovered lands or provide history of the area. Unfortunately, this is an easy and cheap way to provide lore which is great, but at the same time is tedious and a poor way to deliver it. Nothing is worse than fighting through an area, coming across 2 or 3 notes, and then knowing that if you want to know what they say, you'll need to stop playing the game and spend 5 minutes just reading them. I found myself just hoarding the notes because I didn't want to stop playing just to read them, but the more I accumulated, the more I knew that when I did stop to read them, I'd be taking even more time. I got to a point where I would try to read them as I played, and I won't lie, the distraction caused me to die multiple times, thereby making me annoyed rather than immersed. Now, if you don't care about lore at all, you can just read them for the XP gain and forget them, no harm, no foul. In addition, this game has 2 cutscenes in the entire game. One when you first start the game, and a second when you start the Ashes of Malmouth expansion. Now, I'm not saying cutscenes are essential. The ones in Grim Dawn aren't super high quality, but they do their job, are short, and introduce the plot of the game. All round, I enjoyed them. Unfortunately, it appears that the developers just gave up on them. I guess they weren't worth the resources because there's no cutscene when you start the second expansion, The Forgotten Gods. I really wish there was because I am a fan of consistency, and not having one here is very noticeable. But now let's get into the part of the game that kept me playing, and the reason why I currently have over 100 hours in the game. I've said it before, but I love making alts. Making a bunch of unique characters really appeals to me, and with the introduction of the DLC, it makes leveling alts easier than ever. Now, for most ARPGs, the first 20 or 30 levels are relatively boring. You don't have enough unique skills or stats to really take advantage of the build you're trying to make, so that first hump is relatively samey for most of the character builds. You just spam whatever 1 or 2 skills you have, take any gear you can find, and can't take advantage of any synergy. The same holds true for Grim Dawn. This is very much a classic ARPG. But luckily with the first DLC, you gain access to experience potions which can double your experience gain for an hour. Now these potions require you to have maxed reputation with the faction that sells them, and also cost 40,000 iron apiece, so they aren't cheap. You need to have played a lot on your main character in order to take advantage of them. But that's not all. With the second Forgotten Gods DLC, you gain access to tablets which let you skip difficulties. When you play Grim Dawn, you start on normal difficulty. If you so desire, you can also trigger veteran mode, which makes the game harder and nets you an additional 10% XP. So you play through the game and beat it, which then unlocks Elite difficulty. And when you beat Elite, you unlock Ultimate. This is once again classic ARPG a la Diablo 2 with Normal, Nightmare, and Hell. But with these tablets that you can buy, and they aren't cheap, you can then unlock difficulties on your alts without needing to beat the game. At one point, I went and bought the Ultimate difficulty tablet. It cost me 125,000 iron. I then moved to a newly made character. She's level 5 because I needed to beat the first quest with her to unlock the inner prison to gain access to storage. Quick note on storage, there's a personal storage and an account storage so you can move items between characters. This makes it really easy to snowball future characters. Just give them access to great gear and go wild. Now I used the tablet on this character and suddenly it unlocks both Elite and Ultimate difficulty as well as some skill points. I go to Ultimate difficulty, talk to the NPCs there to get quests, talk to the prison guard who lets me in, and boom, gain 14,000 experience. I immediately go from level 5 to level 11. Do the same thing with Elite difficulty and I hit level 12. Because of these items, I am able to bypass the absolute worst part of the game, which is getting your build going. Now throw in some double experience potions and the game becomes much easier. I am a big fan of snowball effects. I like knowing that the more I accomplish on my main, the less work I need to do for subsequent characters. I am actively rewarded for going through the grind before me, and it makes the grind on other characters much easier. They can gain access to all the rift gates without needing to find them manually, and it gives me an incentive to keep playing and try out different classes. Quick note, rift gates are just teleportation portals that are placed throughout the world that you can find. I did the hard part, and now they let me reap the benefits. It's great and fluid and fun, but now we're going to get to the gripes, because I always need to gripe. So first off, a bit of confusion. There are many quality of life improvements in this game. I just detailed a lot of them in regards to starting new characters. Unfortunately, at the same time, there's also a bunch of weird, hardcore aspects that I don't get. For example, chests and interactable items do not appear on screen like items on the ground. Now there is a slight visual effect to show them, but at the same time, why can't I press a button to have them show up? I understand secret areas and walls I can break through are meant to be hidden, but why do I need to scrounge for every little thing? I don't get it. I'm playing hack and slash explosions, not a hidden object game. Also, there's an amazing feature which is the loot table. You can customize which items show up for you to pick up, and you can sort based on rarity, class, skills, whatever you want. It's great. Unfortunately, you won't be using it until either the late game or your alts. And the reason is simple. Money. It costs a lot of money to unlock your character and your account storage, in the millions of iron. You need to pick up and sell almost everything, because not only are you spending money on storage, but as you play and increase your reputation with the factions, you need to start buying blueprints so that you can make items, and you want blueprints because they're account bound and can once again make alts easier. But not only do you need iron for storage and blueprints, but also for XP potions and tablets. One XP potion costs 40,000 iron, and it lasts for 1 hour or until you die. They aren't cheap. Couple that with the tablets that cost 125,000 iron, and you'll be very poor for the majority of your first playthrough. So this amazing loot table which exists really will not be taken advantage of until much, much later. But on to XP potions. I mentioned earlier that they last for an hour until you die, whichever comes first, but I have one major gripe with them. They do not persist through logout. This means that if you log into play, pop a potion, then have to run an errand 20 minutes later and log out, your potion is gone. You just wasted 40,000 iron. Now to be fair, once your main is an ultimate, you'll be holding on to more iron than you know what to do with, but it still doesn't feel great and they still aren't cheap. I don't know why the game can't save your buff timer. It should be simple. Now, I know some people are saying just pause the game and leave your computer on, and yes, that is an option, and it goes even further than that. As I've said, this is a classic ARPG, meaning that it's common for people to farm bosses for loot. So you enter the game, go to a rift gate, run in, kill the boss, then exit and repeat. The problem is that there aren't enough rift gates, especially for a casual player. I understand it's so that boss farming isn't a joke, but at the same time, boss rushing is a very late game event. Many times while just playing through the story, I would go fight through an area, realize I needed to go run an errand, only to discover that the next rift gate wasn't for another area or two. It creates a situation where I either log out and replay the area I just cleared when I come back, thereby invalidating my previous gameplay, or I just leave my game running AFK. And that's what I did. And I did it a lot. So I actually have no clue how much actual playtime I have. I really wish there were more rift gates. The game doesn't even support saving your last personal rift gate point like Torchlight does, but this honestly makes sense because again it would make boss farming way too easy. But I still wish each area had a rift gate. And on the topic of rift gates, I want to rant a bit more. So Grim Dawn has some roguelike dungeons. These are dungeons which cost an item to enter, particularly skeleton keys, which aren't cheap and cost a relatively rare item in order to craft, especially on your first playthrough. If you die while in it, you cannot re-enter and need to exit to the main menu and log back in to reset. Now, I'm completely fine with them. You can see here that I'm doing a run-to-one on normal mode just to show it off. The problem is that most of these dungeons involve you needing to run through 2 or more areas to get to them. It is the epitome of wasting my time. Nothing is worse than fighting through 2 areas filled with enemies, then finally reaching the dungeon to die in it. So you exit out and back in, respawning all the enemies, and then need to spend 30 or more minutes fighting back through these 2 areas just to get back to the dungeon to try again. Why are you wasting my time? It makes me want to avoid the dungeons because not only do I waste a key getting in, but I also end up wasting hours just trying to get back there. It's not fun. Why can't there be a rift gate closer? And on the note of gates in game, you can come across chthonic rifts. These are gates which take you to uncharted regions not connected to the real world. The gates themselves always spawn in the same region, but are randomly placed. Not only that, but they do not appear on your map, meaning that you better remember where you found it if you want to come back later. Now when you enter, it will randomly place you somewhere in the rift, but in order to exit, you need to find a second rift, which is once more randomly placed, and most importantly, you cannot place personal rift gates down in these areas like you can anywhere else. Once you're in, you're stuck, unless you find the gate out or you die. Now all that is fine if this is 1 layer deep, but that is not the case. There are some areas where you enter a rift and find a rift gate which leads to a second layer. Now on my screen I've explored the entire map and the maps aren't procedurally generated, so the maps are always the same and therefore my map is fully filled in. But if this is your first time in, you can be confused and lost. So on the first level you enter, you can find a rift gate leading out. You can also find a rift gate leading to another area. If you're full on loot or feeling like it's too hard and want to leave, you don't know which is which. They're just called chthonic rift. Why can't you name them? What is wrong with letting people know where these rifts take you? So you enter a rift gate, then hit another rift gate, which takes you to another rift area, and within that rift are 2 more rift gates. One to take you 1 level up, and the other which actually takes you out of the rift entirely. And every single rift gate has the exact same name. Just have them state which area it takes you to. They have names. In the top right corner of your screen it shows you the name of the area you're in. This ambiguity isn't hard or challenging. It's just annoying. And speaking of maps, I'm really sad that the maps we have are so poor. Now, there are some really nice features like shrines you can come across appearing on the world map, so if you can't purify one, you'll know where it is for later. But from ARPGs as far back as Torchlight 1, Diablo 1, and Diablo 2, there's been a feature where you can overlay a transparent map over your character. It makes exploring much easier and is a fantastic quality of life improvement. You can't even call it an improvement because it's been featured since the first ARPGs. But Grim Dawn does not do this. You have a small minimap on screen, and if you want to know where you're going, you need to block your screen with a giant map so that you can follow a path and reveal areas you've yet to go to. Why can't we have a transparent overlay? Honestly, I don't know, but I wish it was there. Even worse, if you're looking through your map on a hub trying to find the area you want to riftgate to, the riftgates that you've unlocked and have active will not show up on the local map, so you need to make an educated guess on where you want to go, riftgate there, and then reopen your map to check to see how close you are to your objective. Just why? I mentioned shrines earlier, and here's more minor gripes. So, some shrines require items in order to purify them. You offer up the item they ask for, and boom, purified. You can see on my character that his inventory is empty. There are no items that can be used for purification. Luckily, I have the item needed for purification back in my storage, and the game recognizes that and lets me purify it regardless. This is great. I don't need to riftgate out, get the item, riftgate back, and purify. I can just purify directly with the game, taking the item from my storage, and I can keep playing. Unfortunately, for some reason, I cannot fathom it doesn't work like this for anything else. You can come across broken bridges or barricades in the game where you need to offer scrap and iron or use dynamite respectively to get through them. For some reason, you need to have that scrap or dynamite in your inventory in order to use it. It doesn't matter if you have it in your storage. You need to riftgate out, get the item, then riftgate back and use it. Why? Why does it work so well with shrines but not with these other interactable objects? I just don't understand. It means that you always need to have dynamite and scrap on hand, or else prepare to do a bunch of teleports back to town to pick them up. It's time wasting. I also want to point out that on the whole, I find Elite difficulty pointless. So in Grim Dawn, normal is, well, normal. Elite reduces your resists by 25%, and Ultimate reduces them by 50%. When I played Grim Dawn the first time, I explored every area and did every quest because of course I did. I wanted to experience the game. This ultimately led me to finishing everything in normal mode at around level 70. Max level is 100, so that's pretty good, right? Unfortunately, it meant that for the most part, Elite was a joke. I kind of breezed through it, but I still wanted to do all the quests. This meant that by the time I finished Elite, including the DLC, I had hit the max level of 100. And at that point, all incentive to play pretty much goes away. Your character growth is done aside from a few extra skill and attribute points that you get from quests. It sucks playing through Ultimate with nothing to show for it. All the rewards for doing quests? Useless. XP is useless. The items are useless. I'd found tons of legendaries and blues by now, and my reputations were all revered. But I still had to play through Ultimate in order to unlock the areas. I couldn't do any endgame runs like Bastion of Chaos because I still had to get there. And the only way to get there was to play through the entire Ultimate Mode questline. Honestly, with how much XP you can get, I honestly feel like Elite could be outright removed with next to no detriment. Thanks to tablets, I can skip it all with my alternate characters, but the fact that I had to spend 20 hours in there going through it weren't really that productive or fun. There's also this really odd situation when it comes to aggro ranges. I'm going to explain it by showing a fight with an optional boss on Elite. I'm doing Elite because I haven't done it and I haven't reached there on Ultimate yet. So this boss fight involves a lot of projectiles. My main is a pet class, meaning I use summons for all my damage. The problem is that the boss is on my screen, I'm clicking pet attack on it, but unless I'm really close to the boss, my pets won't attack. Their aggro range is too short. Now, I'm not asking for my pets to be fighting off screen, but I can physically see the boss. I'm over here trying to avoid a bunch of projectiles, and I'm constantly getting distracted because if I take one step onto the podium while trying to avoid the projectiles, my pets turn tail and run back to me. And I have them set to aggressive. This one may be specific to pet classes, but it's really annoying. It almost invalidates me being a pet class and standing back when my pets are fighting because I need to be so close just to have them actually attack. It forces my character, who is designed to stay in the back, to come to the fore where they're most at risk of dying and being in the greatest amount of danger. And in addition to aggro ranges, I have a problem with pathing. For the most part, pathing is fine. It's not great, not terrible, but it's functional. Except in certain areas. Anytime you start moving through houses or short walkways, the pathing breaks down. Now in ARPGs you can move and fight through clicking, but for the most part you just hold down the button. I'm going to show off the problem with Homestead. This is a hub area that you can get to and the route you take to leave one of the gates. You end up leaving here a lot since it leads to one of the Roguelike Dungeons. If while you scroll your cursor towards the gate you brush up against the rampart, your character will veer off course, run up a ramp, and onto the rampart. Then you need to manually move back down and be super precise in getting out. I chose here because it's the easiest to recreate, but there are some areas in the game with really thin walkways where it can make moving around a hassle. And it double sucks when you're surrounded by enemies. Nothing feels worse than dying because your character is being an idiot on a walkway. My final gripe is one that will not apply to the vast majority of players. It's a technical one. For some reason that I do not know, Grim Dawn does not recognize multiple graphics cards. This is especially concerning for laptop players like myself. For some reason, the game only recognizes the integrated graphics card and runs off that. I'm not going to go through and try to fix things like turning it off in BIOS or what have you, and the game is still playable for me, if a bit choppy, but this is the first game I've come across with this problem, and I thought that I would mention it. At the end of the day, it's easy to talk about all the negatives because they're what stick in your mind, but honestly, the game is fun. Even with these minor frustrations, I still found myself coming back to it and wanting to make new characters or wanting to farm reputation. I want to get my reputation to revered because then I can buy mandates which I can give to other characters so that when they play, they get 150% more reputation. At the same time, if I get my enemy reputation to Nemesis, then kill a Nemesis boss, they can drop opposite mandates which then increase their negative points gained by 100%. It's fun, and the snowball effect that you can get with your alts is my jam. I love running through on my main, finding an amazing legendary weapon and going, what character class can I make that will take advantage of that? So long as you enjoy the gameplay loop of ARPGs, and if you've played any of them it's very easy to know what you're getting into going in, then there's a lot here to enjoy. There's so much stuff to explore, and so many stats to track that you can either be enthralled or overwhelmed. There are 3 pages of stats with resistances, and if you want to do a deep dive you can. But in the same vein, as I mentioned earlier, if you simply want to grab a build online and get the loot they recommend, then you can be safe in the knowledge that what you're doing should work. You can put in as much work into Grim Dawn as you want, and whatever level you put in, you're bound to get something worthwhile out of it. My only final gripe is that sometimes there's just too much on screen, which leads to me standing in poison or ether, which kills me very fast. I'm an old man with old man reflexes. I can't keep up with all the particles on screen. Have pity on me. But get out there, fight some gods, fight some Cthulhu monsters, save the world, and have fun doing it. But that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.